Can everyone hear me properly?
Yes.
ये मैं बस रिकॉर्ड कर लूँ एक सेकेंड. Can everyone hear me properly? So this one, let's start. I'll first give you a brief, quick intro of AS Organic Chemistry, and I'll tell you my plan as well of going through all of this. So basically, before moving on, I'll list the topics that you're going to cover, and AS Chemistry, that's 9701. TK, make sure you have your syllabus with you. TK, that's the syllabus code for this. 9701 AS Chemistry, and you'll probably get the syllabus. Actually, now what happens in this is that the syllabus is divided into, obviously there's AS and there is A2, and most of you will not be giving a composite. They'll be giving AS first. Now AS is like half of the syllabus, and the rest of the 50% is your A2. In chemistry, what happens is that the AS, in my opinion, is slightly more difficult. The A2 is slightly easier. If you've done your AS well, you'll find A2 to be slightly easier, less content. AS has a much bigger content, but only very slightly. So you can roughly say that the syllabus is divided. 50% is going to be covered in AS, and 50% is going to be covered in A2. Now, the other thing is the syllabus content. It's divided into three parts. You've got your physical chemistry. Okay, that's the first section. The next one. So that's section number 1. As the second section is known as inorganic chemistry. And then you have your third section, which is known as organic. Okay, that's going to be your third section. Okay, so the third one is known as organic. So broadly, 3 parts, divided into 3 parts. Starting with the first part, what do you study in the first part? The first part is more mathematical. It's more conceptual. So it's more related to understanding concepts, mathematical and conceptual. So what you'll be doing in this first part is in physical chemistry, what you'll be doing is that you'll be doing a lot of mathematical. I mean, there's going to be some maths involved, just like your moles. So I'll list the topics that you study in physical chemistry. The very first one, the way we'll begin with is we'll start off with, and I'm not going to be exactly following the syllabus in the exact order, because we'll be studying some things together which are linked together. Some things that are not linked together, they will be studied separately. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is equations, stoichiometry, and moles. So we'll revise all our equations that you need to know how to make those equations, then how to balance those equations, and then obviously we'll be talking about moles as well, how to do moles questions. Kind of exactly the same as what you've studied in O-levels, except that things are going to be slightly harder. That's the only difference. That's the only difference actually overall as well, that the stuff that you've studied in O-levels, you'll find that to be relatively very easy. You have to really study hard for your AS exams. So right from the beginning, if you're starting off in June, right from the beginning, you have to like really study hard. So this first topic Same concepts, everything pretty much the same, except that you're going to face a lot harder questions. And the only way around that is that you try to do as many questions and practice as many difficult questions as possible. Initially, you'll find these questions to be a lot harder compared to your O-level questions. But if you practice a lot, and remember, in a lot of questions, you would need help in those questions. Uh, so so make sure that you communicate properly, that you have someone who can help you around. Make sure you ask your teachers a lot of questions. Make sure you send them questions a lot on WhatsApp. A lot of help would be needed to solve those questions. So make sure you develop this habit of asking a lot of questions. Whether it's asking questions in the class, whether it's asking questions on WhatsApp, but make sure you develop this habit, because the questions are going to be, the difficulty level is going to be higher. As moving on, the second one is going to be atomic structure that we're going to study, and chemical bonding. And chemical. Now, the basic underlying structure would be the same as O-levels. Like you have ionic bonding, you've got covalent bonding, but there's going to be a lot more detail. So like O-levels atomic structure, chemical bonding was like 20%. This is going to be a lot more in-depth, and there's going to be a lot of detail. I mean, in O-levels, you studied about intermolecular forces. Over here, you're going to discuss intermolecular forces in a lot more detail. So O-levels, atomic structure, chemical bonding was like 20%. This is the rest of the 80%. The third topic that you're going to study is energetics. So again, it's an extension of energy from chemicals, from your O-levels, except that this one involves a lot of calculations. In O-levels, you didn't have a lot of calculations. You just knew exothermic, endothermic, activation energy, some basic stuff. But now this topic would have a lot of calculations. You would have to calculate energy changes. The fourth major topic that you're going to study in physical chemistry is going to be equilibria. So again, an extension of your Lee-Shatler principle. You had your Lee-Shatler principle, and equilibrium would move forward, it would move backward, and so on. Over here, this one would also involve a lot of calculations. There would be a lot of math involved, a lot of calculator involved. So that is also related to calculations. Now, these are your major topics that you're going to cover. 1 second. So, quick question, नहीं इस पे? Is this fine?
Yes, sir. Sir, Mike.
हाँ, आवाज आई? अच्छा, so this one. अच्छा, now apart from these four main topics, there would be certain topics that are part of physical chemistry, but their details or the more extensive coursework would be done in A2, not in AS. Okay, so for example, the fifth one, okay, that's electrochemistry. Now you'll cover that mostly in your A2 syllabus, not in your AS syllabus. You'll go through that, but very little. ठीक है, Taha? Like in AS, you won't really study anything that's specifically new. I'll open the syllabus. Like I can show you the syllabus for this one. Okay, and it's better to actually just, and make sure you have the right syllabus. Okay, it's the 2022, 23 and 24 syllabus that we're working with. Okay, so if you go through the syllabus would be divided into two sections. So a lot of topics are overlapping. So I'm talking about electrochemistry over here. There's electrochemistry in A2 as well. This side is AS. This side over here is A2. So let me just show you how things will work. Just one second. So this is electrochemistry in AS. So it's almost negligible, just 4 lines, and that too is basically mostly your O-level stuff. It's oxidation, redox reactions. You're already familiar with that. Although it's going to be a slightly advanced version of that, but still, it's I mean, the topics that would be covered in AS would be very, very little or very negligible. So very little AS. But if I show you the same topic in A2. Now that's topic 24. That's A2. That's 24.1. So this one covers 24.2. So it covers a lot more things. Just one second. So coming back to this, where's the board? So is this clear that electrochemistry as a topic would mostly be covered in A2 and AS? You'll do very little of that. I say other topics. There are certain topics that are really small. So like you have states of matter, that's ideal gases. Most of you have already studied a lot of these stuff in your physics exam. Like pressure is inversely proportional to volume. Pressure is directly proportional to temperature, so things like that. So certain topics are like really, really small. And then number 7, that's reaction kinetics. That's again. So that's again mostly in your A2. So these topics over here, they're really tiny, they're really small. Their details come in A2. So we'll be focusing on these 4 topics. Mainly, we'll be focusing on these 4 topics. Very little of this, very little of this, very little of this. And then we're going to move towards as a reaction kinetics is again, let me just brief you on that. For AS, it's the same, pretty much the same as your O levels. Like there's activation energy, there's how does the reaction speed up? You're going to talk about catalysts. So it's pretty much the same as O levels. In A2, it's a lot more advanced. Now moving towards inorganic chemistry. This topic, this whole list of topics, that's mostly memorization of facts. I mean, there would be some understanding, there would be some concepts, but it's mostly memorization of facts. So what happens in this inorganic chemistry? What goes on in this is that you're basically supposed to study 3-4 topics. The first one is known as chemical periodicity. Now, this is about remembering facts about period 3 across a period. You need to learn what are the melting points of, let's say, silicon, phosphorus, chlorine. Why do they have those melting points? What does sodium do? What does chlorine do? So all the elements that are part of period 3, all these elements, you learn about those elements. Second one that you're going to study, that's group 2. So about group 2, you'll study different things about group 2, all the elements from magnesium, strontium, calcium, barium, radium, etc. You'll study their properties, their melting points, their reactivity, what are the flame tests, what colors is the flame if they react with oxygen, so all that stuff. And similarly, there's a third one, which is period 7, not period 7, group 17. Or also known as group 7 as well. And you'll study a bit about nitrogen and sulfur. That's very similar to your contact and Haber process that you've already studied. Eutrophication and different things would come in this. Sulfur, that it would involve acid rain as well. So some things would be very familiar. But inorganic chemistry is all about notes and memorizing facts, memorizing melting points, memorizing the reactions with water, memorizing, I mean, all sorts of facts would be memorized in this part. This one is easy if you're good with memorization. Little concepts, fewer concepts, but a lot of memorization involved for this particular one. And then you finally have the third thing. So the first thing was mathematical. The second thing was mostly memorization. And now you have the third part, which is organic. Now, organic is just a more detailed version of your O-levels organic. So it's not going to be something totally different. You'll be studying about alkanes. You'll still be studying about alkenes, alcohols, etc. So most of the homologous Cs would be exactly the same. In A2, the homologous Cs are also different. In A2, you study about benzene, which you have no idea about, but you pretty much have a lot of knowledge about alkanes, alkenes, alcohols, carboxylic acid. So this one is going to be a more detailed version of O-levels organic. And what kind of detail? There's going to be more reactions. For example, alkenes, you studied bromination of alkenes. Now we're going to study a bit more reactions. So a few more reactions. A lot of the reactions would be exactly the same, like hydration of alkenes, hydrogenation of alkenes, bromination of alkenes. But then there would be some reactions that you have not studied. And on top of that, you'll study about mechanisms of reactions. You'll study about, let's say you talk about photochemical chlorination of chlorine under UV light. So you'll study a lot about why those reactions happen, what sort of reaction pathways happen. So it's just a very detailed version of that, and people find this one kind of difficult. It's compared to your O-levels organic was very simple. So difficulty wise, this organic part, that's the most difficult, by far the most difficult. So I'll just write. So somebody's mic is on. So coming to this, so this one, out of the three, if you rank this one is just memorization of facts, easy. If you're good with concepts, mathematical concepts, this one is also easy. The questions are usually relatively straightforward. Organic questions are the hardest, and the organic content is also a lot. There's a lot of requirement for detail, and the only plus thing is that it's just a detailed version of what you studied in O-levels, but a very detailed version. Like O-levels organic is like 10%. This is like the rest of the 90%. So coming back, I'm just going to stress this once more that when you start off with AS, start studying from day one, because you've got lesser time and the content is a lot. And you have to practice. The questions are difficult, so you have to practice a lot of questions. And make sure whenever you get stuck, whenever you face problems, make sure you ask a lot of questions, because that is one habit that will help you in completing the AS course. That if you have to develop the ability to really, really ask a lot of questions. Whenever you get stuck, the only person that can actually help you is searching on the internet will not really be beneficial. Reading a book would also not be that beneficial. Asking someone for help, that is the easiest way to get unstuck. So just make sure that you ask a lot, or develop this habit to ask a lot of questions. I said, I'm moving on. Iske बाद कोई question नहीं है? Is there any question on this?
No.
So moving on, does anyone know how many papers do we have? Okay, so you've got you're right. You've got 5 papers, and so again, Hopefully there is no COVID anymore, so you'll be giving all 5 of them. There pretty much won't be any exemptions this time around, at least. So you've got your paper 1, you've got your paper 2, you've got your paper 3 and 4 and 5. And the first 3 are your AS exams. So that is AS, NP4, and P5. That's your A2. Remember, your result or your final grade is a combined. It's a combined grade. You'll be given a tentative grade based on P1, P2, P3 in your AS, but your final grade is basically a combined grade of all 5 subjects. So starting with the first one, P1, P2, P3. P1 is your MCQs, just like your usual ABCD MCQs. It's the same format, 40 MCQs. Luckily, they have increased the time. Now it's 1 hour 15. Previously, there was a lot of time issues. Even now, you will have a lot of time issues. Time management would be an issue even now. But they've increased the time. Previously, you had to be done with the MCQs in 1 hour. Now they've actually increased the time to 1 hour 15 minutes. So they've given you 15 extra minutes now. But still, time management with these MCQs is difficult. In O-levels, you didn't really have an issue with time management, but over here, there's the biggest trouble that you'll suffer with is time management. You'll have to somehow learn to do things quickly. You have to learn to use your calculators quickly. You have to be really, really quick. So 40 MCQs in 1 hour 15 minutes, and this is out of all the 5 topics by far, it's the hardest. The MCQs are usually not very straightforward, and they're very tricky. Unlike O-levels MCQs, they were slightly easier, but these MCQs they're a lot harder. P2 is a slightly straightforward. It's a relatively straightforward exam. That's your structured. I mean, those are your structured questions. And it's for 60 marks. You usually don't have any time issues with this one. The first one is the one that creates a lot of mess, but the second one usually doesn't create that much of a mess. It's structured, 60 marks, and no issues with time management. And it's a relatively straightforward paper. It's like they'll ask you a question and you'll just answer it. And it's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of pattern involved. I mean, most of the questions, just like your IGCSE as well, they would be following a specific pattern. I mean, for example, in IGCSE or O-levels, you had very typical questions, structured questions on, let's say reactivity series. So the paper would also be following certain patterns. If you do a lot of past paper questions, you'll be able to figure out what the patterns are on a particular topic, whether it's atomic structure or moles. You'll figure out that there are certain patterns that are being followed. So 60 marks, not difficult, and that's about it. And then we'll talk about P3. So I'll just write that this one is. Sometimes it can be a tricky paper as well, but usually it's relatively simple and straightforward. But remember, whenever you talk about structured questions, there's something that I should add. Whenever you talk about written papers, right? Now, MCQs, they're never going to look at your working. Like if you get the right answer, no one really cares how you got, then they're never going to look or know you're working. You could have asked the answer from someone, but you'll still get the 1 mark for an MCQ if you get it right. Or you might just guess out of the 4 options, you might just guess which one is the correct one. And you might get lucky that way. So MCQs, no one is looking for the working or the method or how you figured out the answer. Now in paper 2, they're really looking at how well you answered the question. What words did you use? They look for the statements. What statements did you make? So remember, it's a science paper. Any science paper, it's not an English paper. So scientific papers have to be written in a scientific manner. So you should have at least like you've already given your IGCSE, but now they would be very strict with what kind of terminology that you use. So make sure you are careful about that. Make sure you learn to interpret the marking schemes. When we do questions in class, we'll be using certain terms whenever we talk about, like if somebody is going to ask you about, if I do an O-level analogy, if somebody is going to ask you about the fact why do covalent molecules have low melting points, you're going to use the word intermolecular forces, that they have weak intermolecular forces. So the mark would be divided. There's going to be 1 mark for weak, and there's going to be 1 mark for intermolecular forces. Now, your A-levels papers are going to be a lot more complicated than that. So there's going to be a lot of very specific scientific terms that have to be incorporated in your answer. And you have to be very brief and to the point, and you have to be very direct. So one thing that you have to do with P2 is you have to practice a lot. Practice writing answers. Knowing answers is just half the job. I mean, a lot of people know the concept, they can figure out the answer, but this is where like really bright students, they end up with a C. That there's going to be brilliant students who know how to get an answer, who know how to they know the whole concept, but they're not able to express themselves properly or clearly, at least clearly. So you have to be very careful about this, especially if you're a good student. You have to be very careful about how you answer those questions. So anyway, so I'll move to P3 now. Now, your P3 is your practical. Now, your practical exam, I would say that it's easy, but it's only easy if you have practiced your practicals. Like if you know how to do titration, if you've been to a lab, then it's easy. The questions are also, if you compare all the other ones, they would be easy. The difficult part is not messing things up. Because remember, when you go for a practical, you're in a lab, you're studying in a lab, and you could create a lot of mess while doing things. I mean, like people create a lot of mess even doing simple things. Like if somebody is going to ask you to make something in the kitchen, like a sweet dish or something, then there would be lots of room for error, especially when doing things physically. So the practical itself is easy. The problem comes that if you're not practiced enough, you should have some muscle memory. People who avoid doing practicals in the lab, on the final day, their hands are even shaking. They're not even able to hold the apparatus properly because the time is running out and they have to be quick with things. So make sure you do stuff with your hands. Like if you want to fill up a burette with some solution, make sure you actually do that. It's a very simple concept. Like, I mean, filling up a burette with a particular solution of, let's say, KMNO4. But if you've never done it before and you're doing it for the first time, and let's say you were working in a group and all the time your partner was the one who was doing those practicals, then on the final day, your hands will not be ready to actually do the whole experiment on their own. So make sure you practice a lot. A lot of muscle memory is helpful. How do you wash the apparatus? How do you stir? Like stirring is a simple thing, but remember, if you've never done that before, on the final day, even people get confused with stirring things. So this is something that's easy, but as long as you have some muscle memory and you've practiced this in a lab, then it would be easy. The problem with practicals is a lot of things can go wrong on that day. You could create a lot of mess when you're physically doing things. So this one has a lot of room for error. And a lot of mess could be created on the practical. So you might do one well, P1 very well. Yes. No, there is. I mean, there's P5, which is a written version of P3, but I mean, it's not like your O levels. In O levels, you had options, uh, but now you don't have. You've got a practical, and there's P5, which is a written version of practical, but you have to give both of them. So this one over here is this P5 over here. I mean, you can think of it as an ATP paper. But that's A2. I mean, it's not known as an ATP paper. I'm just for simplicity, I'm stating that it's similar to an ATP paper. I mean, the actual name is. I mean, you have to, in this case, you have to analyze, design. In the new syllabus, I think this is called a planning and design. I'll just check the syllabus. Anyways, I'll just tell you what happens in this. You have to analyze, you have to design, and you have to plan an experiment. So this is kind of like an ATP, just an advanced version of an ATP. But that's A2. The planning, analysis, and evaluation. So in this case, I'll just briefly explain that in P5, what happens is you get two questions. Briefly speaking, one of the questions is more about design and plan. You're given a problem. Let's say you have to filter mud out of some water. So you'll have to design, you have to think of the apparatus that you would use. And there's going to be an analysis question, which is, or evaluation question. That would be about that they'll give you an experiment with all the data and you'll have to analyze the data. But that is also relatively easy. I mean, I'll give it. I mean, if I was giving the exam, I'll say that that's an easy paper. About the weightage, 40 marks. This is 60 marks. That's 40 marks. If somebody has the syllabus, they can give the exact number, but about the percentage weightage. So, I mean, I'm just writing approximate weightages. This one is around, I guess, 22-23% of the overall grade. That's P2. Your practicals are around 10%. Your P5, that's also around approximately around 10%. And then the first one, the MCQs, I think around 13%. Let me just see if that's, I mean, the exact numbers are given in the syllabus. Just a second. Somewhere right at the beginning. Yep, this one. So that's P1 is 15%. This one is 23%. This is 11%. So I just took it as 10%, 11%. So this one, I'll just write it over here. The first one, that's MCQ, that's 15% approximately. And the big one, that's again an A2 exam. That's the big one. That's approximately 40%. I think it was 38.5%. So I'll just go with the approximate number. That's 40%. And that's like a structured paper like P2 as well. So anyways, let me tell you about P4. Again, that's A2. That's, you're not going to worry about that. But remember, most of your grade actually depends on P4. But that paper will happen in A2. It won't happen in AS. So your AS grade is based on these three. And there's going to be a lot of fluctuation because of that. Because remember, the paper that has the most weightage, that happens in A2. Now, if that is happening in A2, the problem would be that your P1s and P2s and P3s, they would be creating a lot of, there's going to be a lot of fluctuation. You might have one good P1, you might have one good P2, and you might mess up the P3. So there's going to be a lot of ups and downs happening in your AS. I mean, this 15% weightage paper might be bad. This one might be good. But most of your grade depends on this. on this P4. So don't worry if your AS grades are fluctuating, because they're going to fluctuate because the weightage is not that much. Everything at the end of the day would depend on this P4. And let me just briefly tell you about P4. That P4 is like it's like a normal structured paper. It's a pretty long one. It's a 100-mark paper. Kind of a lot of time consuming 2-hour paper. That's so 100 marks, and it's 2 hours. So lengthy as well. It's quite lengthy as well. But if you know the content, you should be able to. It's kind of straightforward. It's not out of the 100 marks. You might have 10, 15 marks, 20 marks that would be difficult, but the rest of the paper would be kind of straightforward. If you've prepared well, you should be able to do well in this. The papers that you should be wary of, that's the first one. This is the one that is going to create trouble for you. And then it's your practicals. That is also one that you have to watch out for, because on that day, you can mess things up. It's like preparing stuff physically. If you mess one thing up, a lot of things can go wrong. So it's P1 and P3 that if I were giving the exam, I would be worried about. P2, if I'm well prepared, I should be able to do well in this. P4, if I'm well prepared, I should be able to do well in that as well. So the same with this one. This one is kind of an easy paper as well. So okay, question, any questions about this?
Sir,
Anji.
How much time is given for P2?
It's 1 hour 15 usually.
Okay.
ठीक है. Or P2 के अंदर you don't really have a time issue. ठीक है. It's the first. I mean, this one is the one that causes a lot of problems with time management as well. ठीक है. But again, overall, you have to be quick. So my advice to you is just practice a lot of questions. The difficulty level is going to be high. You have to get used to it. Remember, you won't get used to the questions on the first day. On day one, you'll find them to be very difficult. But if you continue to practice, and this is how you're going to study. Let's say you attempt 10 questions. In O-levels, here's the difference between A-levels and O-levels. This is how you're going to study in A-levels. So let's say in O-levels, you did 10 questions. I mean, most students prepare this way. They attempt a worksheet. Let's say that worksheet has 10 questions. And maybe they get 8 questions right. So 8 of them are right. And 2 of them are incorrect. So 8 out of 10. I'm just giving you, let's say if you're a good student and the exam is really close, you'll get 8 questions right, 2 of them wrong. What do you do with the 2 questions? You'll probably open the book and see, or you can check the marking scheme, and you'll get an idea of why you did them wrong, and you'll develop this understanding why those questions were wrong. Here's your AS. This is how your AS will work. If you follow the same path, you attempt. So that's your O-levels or IGCSE. And your AS, I mean, this is how your AS practice would look like. You attempt 10 questions and you've prepared well. Let's assume you prepared really well. Like you went through all the book notes and you attended all the classes. You think you're confident and you develop a very good understanding of the topic, right? And then you go on and you attempt the questions. Initially, this is what's going to happen. You'll only get 3 right, and you'll get 7 of them wrong. Remember, in A-levels, what will happen is that understanding the concept is just 30% of the job or 40% of the job. The difficult part comes when you have to take that concept and you have to apply it to your questions. That's the difficult part. Comprehension is the difficult part. Understanding the question, reading the question, trying to just figure out what the question is trying. I mean, a lot of times the way the question would be phrased would be so confusing that, I mean, the question, 80% of the whole difficulty in solving the question is comprehending or understanding the question. And then you can apply the concepts. So So this is how your practice would look like. You got 3 questions right, 7 of them are wrong. You look at the marking scheme and you will have, for most of them, you won't be able to figure out how the examiner is solving the question. You'll open the book, still you won't be able to figure out how those questions are being solved. So in A levels, human help would be needed a lot. You would have to consult your teachers. I mean, whether it's me or someone else, but you would have to consult and talk to teachers a lot. And that's the quickest one as well, because remember, you're out of time as well. There are 3 ways you can actually solve a question. If you want to learn something, there are 3 ways of doing that. मैं इसका बताता हूँ, yes, ये कब बताता हूँ. I'll also highlight this point. Remember, you're short of time. In A levels, it's just, I mean, right after 8-9 months, you have your exams. So you're very short of time. The content is going to be a lot. So there are 3-4 ways of learning something. One is you open YouTube videos and you'll try and spend your time trying to figure out how to answer a question. But that's a very time-consuming way of learning things. Like if you want to figure out why did you got those 7 questions wrong, the internet is going to be a very time-consuming. It's going to be a waste of time. The second one would be you open your books, but again, that's going to be a waste of time because you won't be able to figure out which concepts are linked to that question. Remember, you have to be quick with your practice as well. You can't waste a lot of time. You can't be stuck with this. If you go and ask someone, whether it's your senior, whether it's your teacher, if you ask someone who knows how to solve those questions, it's just going to take you 5 or 7 minutes to go through those questions and develop an understanding of how to solve those questions. So make sure the easiest way to learn something in A levels is not to reach out to the internet. Instead of opening your books, just ask someone. I mean, the books are good for developing an understanding, but solving questions, remember, it's always good to ask someone. As a Baki uspe the AS and A2, that's organic, right? AS and A2 organic, that's kind of, they're different, but at the same time, they're very similar as well. Because whatever you study in AS organic, that will show up in A2 organic as well. A2 organic is very different. It's got a lot to do with benzene, which is a molecule that's not in AS organic. So which is why it's going to be very different. But remember, in chemistry, everything is linked. So whatever you study in AS organic would also be linked with A2 organic. So there's going to be a lot of overlapping. It's not like math or physics. In chemistry, every topic is linked with every other topic. When you're studying group 2, you'll also be studying atomic structure and chemical bonding because those concepts would appear in group 2 as well. If you're studying group 17, there might be concepts related to equilibria that might come in. So everything in chemistry is linked with every other topic. So which is why even though A2 organic is different, but it is kind of linked with AS. So is this all clear? Question 3. We're out of time.
It's all clear.
So कल से मैं शुरू करते हैं. We'll start with moles and we'll start with the first one. Remember, it's same concept. First one. This is the topic that we'll study. I'll send you a plan as well. That's the topic we'll start off with. The only difference in this one and O levels is that the questions are going to be more difficult. Okay. So let's start with topic number 1 tomorrow. Okay, take care, everyone.
Allah.